Okay, and welcome to Wrestling, and thank you guys for listening to us. We are so happy to be back, and this episode we're going to be talking about wrestling and ECW, and you'll be surprised at some of the historical knowledge that we have, the places that we've been. And when I say we, I'm referring to me, at Jon Ensman, been a while, guys, and we are referring to the amazing in-ring art, Justin. How are you, Justin?
It has been a while, and the last time I saw you was in person. How about that?
We got to hang out in person, guys, and we won't go too much on it, but I will say that the meetup at Button Mash was a success. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was awesome.
It was very cool.
It came out, it was very, I sold some drawings, I sold some pins. Jon was awesome with helping out.
I met Peter Rosenberg in the first couple minutes, which was cool.
We met Peter Rosenberg. Ted, of course, was awesome with all that stuff he had, and just to be a part of it was great. And I sold some drawings and met some cool people. And yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen again, but can't wait.
We'll see. I thought it was awesome how, because I was your friend, they just trusted me, which was cool. They're like, hey, if he's your friend, he's cool. So they let me have full access and security of the whole place. And, it was fun being able to walk in and out while all the dudes had to stand in line. But
yeah,
I did a little bit of line duty because, people were trying to sneak into the back. So, and, his friend, I did it with Ted's best friend, and that dude was awesome.
Okay, that's cool, because I just got a every time I was trying to do something with bracelets, I had to address someone at my stand and everything, and it just got insane. And
it was pretty crazy. Like, I thought we would be hanging out, and then I come to realize, like, I barely even saw you that day because we had to do our own things, like, you're selling stuff, I'm back here doing this, and but it was definitely fun, and it made me realize wrestling fans are pretty intense, dude. Well, there's a lot of crazy motherfuckers out there.
A lot of it, just thinking about the people that are traveling half across the world, of course, to see WrestleMania and all the stuff that went with it, but the people that were there just to buy Ted's stuff it's just incredible.
Oh yeah, and I met a few very successful people that let's say they weren't too shy on spending money in LA that weekend. And,
yeah. A lot of people are saving up for their whole year just to do stuff like this. And, also, Stash Pages, he had a lot of cool stuff. Matt Bovin had a lot of cool stuff,
and
too.
I bought some stuff from Stash Pages. I actually got a Dragon Lee mask.
And I got his little Hayabusa purse. That thing is awesome.
I know, that was cool, too. If you didn't get it, I would have. So
well, it was other way around. You didn't get it, so I got it. At the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, there you go, because I was thinking about it. But no, that was pretty awesome. And I thanked a lot of those guys over Instagram. And and of course, they all said, oh, it was great seeing you. So, yeah, we'll see when it happens again, in Vegas or in LA. It's probably going to be a while for LA. They'll probably do a SummerSlam there eventually.
It would be great to do something in driving distance. San Francisco is a possibility, I guess, again. But Vegas, I could see doing a Mania for sure.
Vegas would be pretty great.
I don't want to go to Vegas again, but if it's for Mania, I think it would be worth it.
You know what, Justin, also, too, the thing I'll quickly mention is I did meet a lot of people from all over the world. A lot of British fans. Lots of British fans. There was this large black gentleman at one of the bars I went to. He actually, I'm not going to lie, maybe I was stereotyping, he looked kind of intimidating, and then when I went up to him and talked to him, he said, oh, hello, how are you doing today?
Over at the Kibitz room, right?
Yeah, and he was there for WrestleMania. Met some guys on Monday that were getting ready to go to Raw that night. So it was a great time. It was a great weekend, and it's a special event. I guess not until the Olympics, is it going to be this crazy? But there's events there all the time, so
Yeah,
we'll see.
and
They have a Super Bowl there in the next couple of years.
well, they had it this last year when the Rams
Oh,
won.
they had it last year. Okay, so it'll be like 5 more years. They'll have another
Probably.
one there.
There's this one guy who was really cool that was from Canada, and he was messaging me a few weeks before, like, oh, I want to get some stuff from you, and then also, one of the other guys there is he can have his shirts and all that, and he ended up showing up, bought a drawing, and of course the next day I see him sitting in the second row on TV at WrestleMania, and it was just like cool. And he was messaging me afterwards, where should I go to eat, and I was going back and forth with him.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he had a good time in LA, and it's just crazy that people from Canada are like, hey, I want to come see you and get something from you. That's just crazy. And there was this guy, he didn't end up buying anything yet, but there's this guy from England, and I'm a huge fan of like British comedy shows.
Oh, me too. That's how I connect with a lot of British guys, is I'll be like, I'm a huge fan of this,
right.
and this. And they'll be like, I love that show too.
So I don't know if you know this show, but if you don't, I think you'd really dig this show. So this guy kind of reminded me of the show. Okay, so People Just Do Nothing. You hear that show?
I don't know that one, no.
Okay, so it's basically about these guys that have like an underground rap station in like suburban London, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all like, think they're the biggest thing in the world, but they have some underground radio station that not that many people listen to.
Yeah.
I don't know. It used to be on Netflix. I don't even know where to find it now. It's done mockumentary style.
Okay.
And the main character's name is, why am I losing his train of thought? Corrupt FM is the name of the station.
Mm-hmm.
God, what's his name? The main character. Here, I'll look it up. But anyways, so one of the prized possessions, Grinder.
Anthony MC Grindash
Grinder.
Zographos.
His name is Grinda. Okay.
Grinda.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would watch this show it's hilarious. But anyway, so one of the main character, Grinder, one of his prized possessions is his Averex jacket. And Averex is one of those not bands, but clothing companies that was famous, in the mid 2000s, early 2000s, like around the time, like, I don't know, like Academics or Fubu or Echo, kind of thing.
Yeah.
A streetwear. And, this British dude was wearing the Averex jacket. And I said, hey, man, I know you're British and all, but the Averex jacket, I don't know if you know that show, People Just Do Nothing, but you just totally remind me of that. And he's like, yeah, that's a great show. And, I love that show, and I'm really, impressed that you knew that or whatever. And, he ended up messaging me.
There you go.
He messaged me something, a couple days later with a kind of a quote from that show. So
nice.
Shout out to him. It was cool.
That's awesome.
So it just
and have you seen the movie People Just Do Nothing Big in Japan?
I haven't. I know of his existence, but I don't know where to find it.
I don't know where. You might have to use a VPN and log on to BBC, because I think a lot of BBC shows, you just watch them on BBC.
Yeah, well, I would definitely, knowing you, I think you would really dig the show. People Just Do Nothing.
Well, I'm a massive fan of a lot of British comedies, all the way from Webb and his homeboy, and then all of Fry and Laurie, to IT Crowd, even to Irish, anything from Graham Lineman, like IT Crowd, or Father Ted are just incredible shows.
Or Hardy Bucks. Have you ever watched that?
I don't know, but I mean, even stand up. I'll watch a lot of British stand up. Jimmy Carr just insulting people. It's just it's a lot more clever than most American stuff used to be. American stuff is getting better, but it's always been great.
Stuff. I'm a big fan of Still Game. Hardy Bucks is basically an Irish version of Trailer Park Boys, I guess you can compare it to.
Oh boy.
So it's pretty good.
There's one Northern Irish one called Dairy Girls on Netflix that's really great. Okay. Although being it's Northern Irish, like, there are points when you might need to use subtitles on that one, because it gets pretty thick.
There's some of those, especially when I was watching Still Game, you have to like watch a few episodes to get used to the basically the slang.
Yeah, or some intense dialect changes.
Yeah.
I remember one show, instead of another, they would say a nuller.
Right.
And that took me a while to get. I was like, another one. Okay, I totally understand it.
All
But
right. Sidetrack
no,
on British anyway. Great. Yeah.
it
Great
was a
event.
great time.
Yeah.
Great. It was a great time, and I went to a few different shows. We went to see NXT. That was fun too. A lot of memorable stuff.
Yeah, we
there.
went with my youngest son to see NXT. I saw the tickets that night, and I'm like, "Hey, man, let's just do this show."
You made that so relaxing for me because it was a rough night for me. I would probably partied a little too hard the night before. I'm just gonna be honest. And that day, you knew all the places to go and stuff, so we were able to just get in there and out pretty quick, which was very nice.
Yeah, we used my same parking situation that I use when I go to the Kings game. Oh, actually, it was closed.
And we had
to park on the street.
It was closed,
for
but
free.
because it was Cloverleaf is what you liked, right? But
yeah, Cloverleaf parking, Shamrock.
But
parking,
we found one
yeah.
pretty close. We found one pretty close.
We found street
and we were
parking about a block away. From
we
where I
had a
usually
little
park.
VIP area, so the bathrooms were not crazy.
Yeah,
and even the concessions weren't crazy or anything. So I did Google this, by the way. So the crypto arena does have the most expensive beers and food in all of America, just to be sure.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
I
not
didn't
surprised.
realize, but there's places in New York, like the big arenas, where it's half the price. So I don't know why it's just like that there, but
yeah, I mean, dude, I've had the season tickets to the Kings. For this is my second year. I'm going to be third after this, and I've bought beer twice myself. Occasionally, I'll
it's
take
so
a
not
friend
worth
with
it.
me to the game that I don't pay for the ticket or anything, and they will buy me a beer. But I've bought a beer once, because I just can't do it. I can't spend $19 on a beer.
And if you are an actual person that wants to get drunk at one of these events, you're gonna be paying $70.
I'm blown
$80.
away by the people that say, well, first of all, we go to these games and there's just a bunch of people that you can tell are like, hey, let's go to a hockey game. I've never been to one before. And then they're barely in their seats and they're getting drunk and they come back and then they leave early. It's like, just go to a bar.
Jeez.
Just go to a bar and leave the real fans alone.
Watch the game.
Watch the game. Come there to watch the game. If you get wasted and have money, great. But like, if you're just gonna come here it just seems stupid. Go to a bar, go to a club, and even then you'll spend less money, or just
you'll spend way less money. At most of them. I did go to one club that was even more expensive than the arena.
Right, but you're there to people watching. Yeah, like if you're gonna go to a hockey game and you're not a hockey fan and you're gonna get wasted, it's like, just go to a bar, like
and you can do that too. I found a lot of places that were well priced, bars with good prices around LA too. I'm gonna say this for anyone that wants to hear this: the bar at Union Station is cheap, small, and nice, and no one will fuck with you there, and it's cheap. So for anyone that, if you want to get drunk, just go to Union Station, pay $5 a beer. But if you want to get drunk, probably don't go to the hockey game for the first time and spend $80 on yourself.
On 2 beers. LA, a lot of great dive bars. I don't go to bars very often anymore. That's just not in my lifestyle. I like them. There's a lot of just amazing classic bars that I can walk to, but just don't get to do it that often. So I remember telling you, like, there's Formosa Cafe and there's Jones. Those are great places, and they're in movies and stuff. But yeah, and
what was the name? What was the name of the legendary place that John Wayne used to go walk to eat?
Formosa Cafe.
Formosa or Formosa? Formosa.
Also,
that was cool to see.
Yeah, if you ever go to, if you ever watch LA Confidential, that's the bar they're at. And there's like an old train car that's attached to it. It's a really cool spot.
I've seen it in so many movies or something in my head. When we drove by it, I was like, holy shit, dude.
Yeah.
I need to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood again and see some of those old restaurants they go to and wonder if they're real.
There you go. I mean, we did see some of the historic sites. There's some, I wish I would have got you to the ocean and stuff, but next time.
No, but I went to the ocean.
Did you go to Santa Monica?
No, my sister brought us to Newport Beach, dude.
Okay. That Newport's nice. That's good.
It was very nice.
Yeah.
And the house, we found a house that had one bedroom that was $15 million.
Sure you did. Right. But,
And, no, it was actually beautiful, and they're renovating it and stuff. But the thing that blew my mind was seeing the ocean, and you can see the curvature of the earth, dude. You can actually see a slight curve. It's not flat, you know what I'm saying?
the horizon.
That like kind of the horizon, it blew me away. I was
Right.
like, holy shit, dude.
Hey, you know,
Also saw
it's a
Go ahead.
very desirable place to live. You understand why everyone flocks out here, you know?
I mean, I get it. It was really fun though, going from how quickly we were in these grass meadows to all of a sudden, boom, we're in an ocean town, you know,
Yeah.
a sea town with like seafood everywhere. And only disappointing thing is we ate as a seafood place that I feel just served us fucking frozen seafood.
Yeah,
Really
I mean,
pissed.
that's
Probably
very
not
possible.
uncommon.
Yeah.
So, but no, the Newport was nice. I told my sister, why is there no homeless people here? And she's like, they probably drive them all to Venice Beach.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, you were in Orange County when you were in Newport, so there's a whole different ball game down there.
It was very fun, dude. And you know what? It really wasn't that expensive. It is something I definitely want to do again soon. I have all these like that anime place. If I was in my right mind, I would have probably bought 10 things from there.
Yeah, so
And I could have sold them. I could have sold them here for twice as much.
because you know, we'll be a little more of this LA trip stuff, but I remember, you know, when John was coming out, he was saying that he was gonna have to go to Union Station to go see his family. And I was like, well, that's perfect. I'll take you down there. We'll go to Little Tokyo. We'll go to Alvera Street. And, you know, those are two pretty good things to see that I think you would like. And
Those were great things.
and his plans did kind of change at that point. But going to the NXT show, which is in downtown LA at Crypto.com Arena, afterwards, it was a 10 a.m. show. So by noon, we were out of there, 1 o'clock. I don't remember how long it was. Good show, by the way. And we haven't even talked about that at all. I was like, okay, let's go to Little Tokyo, because I know John is a, you know,
Anime fan. I'm a weeaboo. Yep.
he's a weebo. So we went, or whatever it is, Debo from Friday. We went to Little Tokyo. We were lucky enough to find parking there. Outside of there not being a bathroom anywhere, but
Oh, that's
I made sure that he got to go see there. He bought an anime figure, and I think you were a little bit in heaven there.
It was awesome. It's just, you gotta understand, guys. I sleep from about 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. every day. And so trying to switch my entire sleeping schedule and being off by an hour and drinking a lot on Friday really caught up with me by Saturday. And so we're in this anime place, and all of a sudden I just started feeling terrible, like anxiety, you know, sweating. I'm just like, dude, so I changed plans and stuff, but I think you had a great, you had a great plan for us. I mean, it was really cool. And like I said, if I was had a bit more sleep, I would have felt better. But you know what? I learned for the next time, you know?
Yeah,
what
maybe
not to do.
a week or a few days before, try and get yourself acclimated to that.
That's exactly it. And if I'm gonna wake up early the next morning, no reason to be drinking the night before that amount. So
And honestly, it's
there's just
amazing
to
that
learn a
we
few
do
things.
this many shows, because you and I have basically completely opposite like life patterns and days.
Yeah.
And well, anyway, so after, you know, Little Tokyo, which was, you seemed to enjoy it. I know that of course you'd want to be there.
I did, but I would have gone to every store, dude. I would, if I was feeling like I do now, I would have gone to every store. I would have been like, dude, let's do this, that.
It was pretty
But yeah,
crowded. It was pretty crowded down there too.
the no bathroom thing really bothered me too. That
Yeah.
was absolutely ridiculous.
So-
I don't know how.
After, you know, that time there, we drove a little bit across downtown to go to Alvera Street, which is like this traditional kind of Mexican area where there's just all
So
kinds
I
of...
went back there, and there was some stuff you didn't tell me that I wish you would have told me.
Okay, maybe
gonna
I didn't
be
know.
honest.
What is it?
I didn't realize that the oldest building in all of LA was there.
Oh, that Pico thing? Is that what it is?
I don't know which
Oh.
one, but I guess that is like where LA kind of started, supposedly.
Yeah.
Was that area, and I did not know, like hundreds of years ago. So I didn't really realize that, which made it a little more interesting to go back the second time. You know, I just thought it was just a tourist area, but in which it is, but I didn't realize, there's some of the oldest architecture in all of LA right there.
Yeah.
So that was cool. Going back the second time was nice, and I do recommend that little restaurant in there. That was fucking incredible. I was shocked at how good it was, to be honest.
Where there was a big line at the beginning when we walked in, right?
It's kind of in the middle of Oliver Street.
Yeah,
I would
there's
say.
restaurants.
From where we walked in, it was on the left, and then it's like a little tavern. You go in there, and it's just like a little tavern area.
Right.
And dude, I like I said, I was shocked. I was like eating that burrito, being like, "How is this so good, bro?" Like it was.
You're in LA.
I got a wet burrito, dude. Woo.
That's good, huh? That's good. I'm glad you got some of that food that we have.
I wanted to walk to Japantown, but dude, that place is so complex. Even the Google Maps confused me.
Not Japantown. Japantown's where I took you the first night.
No, okay, Little Tokyo.
Little Tokyo, yeah. Japantown is where we had the ramen the first night, where most of the stuff was closed.
And that was the best food I ate all week.
That ramen, really?
Ramen was so fucking good.
Yeah, that was the first time I was at that spot, and I really dug the inside of it. Really cool how they designed it.
It was so cool, and it fits like 10 people inside there.
Yeah, but they made it like you were on the street having ramen.
Dude, but we got to hit that chicken place next.
Okay, yeah.
That sounds so. Was it chicken karaage or?
Yeah, karaage, the Japanese fried chicken. But I'm telling you, what's great about where the airport to with no traffic wasn't that far, but I took you on kind of the scenic route back.
And I appreciate that. Like, I have fond memories of just seeing those Woodward malls and seeing the Century City.
Westfield.
Is that what it's called?
Westfield, yeah.
Westfield. What did I call it?
Moorfield or Woodfield or something. I don't know. But anyways.
So, no, it was definitely very memorable and fun. So I hope you guys allow us decompressing, because him and I haven't really gotten to sit here and talk about it since then. And, sometimes we use the podcast to kind of decompress. Quickly, by the way, this is a show about ECW, guys,
right.
And we will give
coming up now.
I will give you guys timestamps. Well, I still want to quickly talk about the NXT show with everyone that you and I went to. I went to ROH before that. I think that was the best show I saw. A lot of people said the best show the best match of the weekend was what's it called? Cesaro. No, not Cesaro. Claudio versus Eddie Kingston.
Okay.
A lot of people said that was the best match of the weekend. Have you been able to see it at all?
I haven't seen anything from that show outside of Dante Martin.
Oh yeah, that was terrible, actually. I don't know. We were walking afterwards, and some guy was like, "I seen his leg turn 270 degrees backwards."
Awful.
And I was like, Jesus. So, and I think that's what happened. That was terrible, but that was actually a real great show. But NXT was a surprisingly good show, and it was a lot of fun, right? You agree with that?
I mean, as someone that hadn't really followed NXT since maybe, 2018?
So it's kind of all a surprise for you. Yeah. I mean, I kind of filled you in on a lot of the guys that you might not know, because a lot of them are indie guys that were indie back then.
But since the reset, I mean, I knew Braun Breaker. And of course
Braun Breaker.
Yeah.
Dragon Lee. You've heard of course, Dragon Lee, but you've heard of Indy Hartwell. You've heard of her.
I knew her.
And Dexter Loomis. And,
there were some people I definitely knew.
Don't get me wrong, there were a couple matches on the show that really were not very exciting, like the women's tag team match was kind of lame.
No, but overall, a very good show, better than I expected. Honestly, to be honest, we found really cheap tickets. And we were there for less than $20.
Those tickets were awesome, dude.
And we had really good seats, to be honest. And we got to go through the VIP area of the arena.
We had a funny people sitting around us, which was nice. Good vibe.
This hilarious kid sitting behind us that were probably, 10, 12.
See, I don't know if they were kids or not, dude. That confused me, actually.
No, the people behind us, they had a dad, and there was about 3 or 4 kids.
Oh, because they weren't cussing, though, I'll say that.
No, they were just saying, murder him, or murder that boy.
Murder him.
And the guy in front of us was hilarious, reacting
The guy
to
in front of us was hilarious, because I remember they said Melo versus Braun, and they were like, man, no matter what era it is, it's always Melo versus Braun somewhere. and that cracked me up. But
It was pretty
you
funny.
know, in all seriousness, I think this show, what it really showed me as an NXT enjoyer, it was that Carmelo Hayes is a main eventer. You know, he had the aura, he had the presence, and he looked great in the main event. So Braun Breaker is now turned heel, and he's gonna
Heard that, yeah.
be all evil.
Well,
And
I
probably
thought,
a good thing, maybe because of his dad. I don't.
well, I mean, his dad.
And that news had just broke when we were there in the morning, and you were
Pretty
filling me
much.
in on that.
Yeah, and I really hope. Let's just assume that Braun doesn't carry those same values that his dad did.
You can't in WWE.
Okay,
bro,
let's just
because
assume.
when that,
I'm going to give the kid the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
That he doesn't carry those disgusting. Well, here's the thing. He can think and believe
Mores.
whatever he wants, but to have the like
the
to
balls
be-
to go up to someone
shout-
and fucking
not even that.
scream at them.
but to scream it and to mean someone, I mean, that's a whole other level of just.
It's so malicious,
disgustingness.
dude.
And how stupid can you be? I mean, anyway, let's just put that aside. I'm just assuming that someone like Braun Breaker
That's
does
fine.
not, have those values. I'm going to give the kid a benefit of doubt for now.
Well, let me tell you this, bro. There's someone named that wrestled for WWE. His name is Lars Sullivan, and he was found posting homophobic stuff from 10 years before.
Right.
Even though he was in gay pornography, but he still posted that stuff, and he was fined like $10,000 for it.
Yeah,
dude.
but that was a few years before, that 2020
Trance.
that really hit its peak with
That was
that.
like 2019.
Yeah. Well, anyway, the bottom line is, as the stupid things that he said were not only stupid, but they could potentially do damage to his son's career.
True.
To be honest with you, and that's where you're like, why didn't they just call him Braun Steiner? I was one of those like, let's. And now it's like,
Ooh,
we
now
gotta
it looks
separate
good that
now.
they didn't do that.
Now it looks good that they didn't do that. So maybe they knew something we didn't. That's why they were doing it. But anyway, he ruins pretty much all his, potential extra income to make through, signings and whatnot.
True.
But
Yeah.
he potentially could really have hurt his kid's career, because who knows? I mean, they could have been set to debut him on Raw, and they decided to put.
That's very true. And then,
on the back
they could
burner.
have been wanting to change his name or something now that Vince is back. You never know. But yeah, now it's like, okay, well, fuck. It sucks. The dude's damaging his own legacy and the legacy of his brother and others. So
and his son.
just
I
sad
mean,
to see that.
honestly, Braun's a guy who, if you wanted to slow cook him for a year, maybe that's the guy that takes out Roman.
I mean, God, man. Why can't we all just be like Jay Briscoe and his brother? I mean, wait, Jay Briscoe's the one that passed away. I'm sorry, right? I
Yeah.
made a mistake.
Yeah.
I was talking about Mark Briscoe. Why can't we all just be like Mark Briscoe, bro? Just be positive and be loving.
Yeah, and those are some guys that kind of early of their career, they did something somewhat now that seemed
Stupid.
inappropriate, but they were able to correct it and go about it the right way and change, right?
Yes, they were, although I do want to be fair. They weren't allowed on TV until one of them passed away, which is fucked
True.
up. But yes, the rumor was that Jay was always asking, how can I improve?
Right, and I know they were
Can I
doing the
get better?
Confederate flag thing for a while, which, obviously didn't age well and all that, but but yeah, that's where they are now.
Yeah. But it sucks what happened there that weekend.
Yeah.
I was sad to hear that news, and then of course, and we should bring up Giselle Shaw.
Giselle Shaw, yeah.
Giselle Shaw. We should bring her up because I've heard nothing except good stuff about her for years. I remember about 5 years ago, Ospreay did a thing, my 5 favorite wrestlers, and brought up Giselle Shaw. I didn't know that Giselle Shaw was trans, and I honestly don't care.
No, I
I
don't
heard she's
either.
a great
Yeah.
wrestler.
Yeah.
So, pretty soon the people are going to come out being like, "Oh, it's unfair that they're wrestling against." Never mind. I'm gonna stop
I mean, that
myself now.
doesn't even hold water. This is a scripted. I mean, they were doing it with Nyla
No,
Rose
but I
too.
could see people getting crazy like that, bro.
No, they already are. It's
Okay. Yeah.
whatever. Moving on.
It's unfair. They're going to hurt the women. Moving on to something a little more positive, but with a little bit of dark stuff to it. And timestamp here. And we forgot to clap, so I'm going to have to do extra work. Timestamp here is half an hour in. Well, I'll mention that at the beginning. If you want to listen to only ECW, go a half hour in.
Good idea.
We are going to talk about wrestling and ECW. So first, when we talk about I like to get, I like when we you and I kind of do a broad like view first, and then we do another broad view after we've talked about it. So why don't you give us a kind of a broad view of ECW from your current perspective?
From my current perspective, I think ECW is kind of something that we see the influences of almost in every genre of wrestling. Whether it's New Japan, WWE, AEW, the local indie, GCW, whatever, there are influences from ECW everywhere to this day. And whether it was originally, whatever it was originally happened in ECW, but I think ECW kind of took a lot of those things and made them live on to this day. Not only are we're seeing, the match style, match quality, those quick moving matches, whether they started in ECW or not, the loud rings, the sound of the rings, the extra bouncy rings and stuff like that you see on the indie scene and all that.
The crowd chanting the name of the promotion that they are watching because they love it so much.
Or just the fact that you have a lot of CWs out there, right? Or just GCW. That, of course, you cannot say it isn't come from ECW. And, just when you go to an indie show, the vibe, you always, that ECW feel,
Yeah, there is that feel. I mean, I believe. I don't think I've ever been to an indie show as, that ROH show I went to recently was kind of along that lines. People are chanting ROH, and there was some crazy matches, but it's hard to compare to nowadays, man, because ECW at the time was so unique and so its own thing where, this style of wrestling nowadays has been more co-opted into the mainstream, right? Especially with AEW and bleeding every week. And
if it wasn't for ECW, ROH probably would never exist.
Well, and I think we know that now after something we talked
GCW,
about earlier.
or just these indie federations that have come up may have never even existed. I mean, maybe NXT would never exist if it wasn't for something like ECW.
And a lot of wrestlers would exist, or at least they would have very different career trajectories. So
absolutely,
we're talking about ECW, and this is Extreme Championship Wrestling, although it did start as Eastern Championship Wrestling at first. Now, obviously, as we go through here, we have a lot of tropes from the late 90s, mid to late 90s, the extreme attitude that kind of existed in the Attitude Era and marketing at the time where sex sells, right? And this was, what woman was her name in ECW? This is Nancy Benoit, right?
Yeah. I mean, also keep in mind around this time, this is when, kind of shock television and Howard Stern.
And there you go.
MTV.
The shock jock stuff.
Yeah.
It was Bubba the Love Sponge. It was Howard Stern.
Even before Bubba the Love Sponge, but just like that Howard Stern type of, pushing the borderlines of content. Beavis and Butthead,
Early South Park.
Society was at kind of an, I don't know if obscene level is the right word, but we had a very, very, it was a very interesting time.
It was a very interesting time, and definitely pushing the limits.
Yes.
was a big deal back then. It's actually pretty hilarious because, we lived through it and it was like, yeah, that's cool. Nowadays we're like, nah, dude, don't push the limits.
Yeah,
Please don't do
I
that.
mean, there's a lot of stuff that came out of that era that didn't age well. A lot of ECW stuff did not age well. We'll be honest. I mean, there was a lot of kind of just not, I don't know, politically correct things that took place. But the overall broad
there are
strokes
things
of
its
it
time.
we're
Of
good.
its time. And, I don't know if the broad strokes were necessarily that great, in my opinion, from what I've seen, to be honest, but I have seen some incredible matches. I've heard a lot of people say that, ECW at the time, especially living in Philly and living on the East Coast, that it was revelatory. I could totally see that, It was very East Coast. It was, I've heard a guy from Voices of Wrestling, can't remember his name. I think his name is Joe. Do you know the Voices of Wrestling guys?
Yeah, through osmosis.
Rich Craich.
Yeah.
Rich Craich and
Heard the names.
Joe
Lanza?
It's Joe, right?
Lanza?
Joe Lanza.
Yeah.
Yeah, he did a whole thing on ECW. He's done like a bunch of shows called, September to Remember or something like that.
Right.
And I remember he was like, it's East Coast. Like, we like things fast. We like things violent, and it definitely gave to that style, and definitely was influential. So I think the biggest thing when we talk about broad strokes is the influence, and you brought that up as well. So let's talk about a little bit about how they kind of got started and where it began. And it's probably before a lot of you guys think. So we're talking 1989 to 1994 are where the actual roots come in. This was the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance, owned by Joel Goodert. And they would use the Tri-State Heavyweight Championship belt to represent the championship. Although the ECW title was not considered a continuation of that title. So as we go through here, eventually we start the promotion as Eastern Championship Wrestling, ECW. At the time, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert, the lead booker, he was the lead booker, had managed to secure television time on Sports Channel Philadelphia in 93. Eddie Gilbert, after falling out with Todd Gordon, was replaced by 28-year-old Paul Heyman, right? And he had just been fired from WCW.
Paul Heyman, you don't realize how young he was when he was doing this.
It's funny looking back, 28. Jesus, like there's kids at my work that are 28, and I'm like, you don't know shit.
And he got his start early too as a photographer,
photographer, right?
Much like Jim Cornette.
I think a lot of Japanese guys too would go in there and, as you figure out how can I get my foot in the door, right?
Yeah.
It was a lot easier back then, too, because WWF nowadays, they just be like, get the fuck out.
We got a quick little run-in trying to get your attention here, I think.
Oh, hey, little guy, how are you?
I'm good.
Did you have fun hanging out with me?
Yeah.
Should I come visit you guys again in a little while?
Yeah.
But what do you want to do this time? Should we go to the zoo and botanical garden?
I don't know.
Okay, well, you think about it, and then you let me know, all right, little bub?
Okay.
Have a great night.
You too.
That was Kenzo. He took in the NXT show with us.
Very, by the way, guys, I'm going to say extremely polite young man. I mean, most of the day he didn't even talk. He just walked along with us and just chilled. So,
yeah,
very polite.
He was pretty cooperative that day. Not every
very
day,
cooperative.
He's a good kid. Yeah, he's a great kid.
I'm always worried about kids. I'm like always wondering where they are. And I know you are too, because you have kids. So you have to be that way.
Yeah.
And he was always right there,
Yeah.
Standing right
he doesn't
there.
wander off. And no, yeah, both my kids are good about that. They stay close.
Very opposite of what I was as a child. So
we were talking about Paul Heyman, a lot like
Paul Heyman started out as a photographer.
Yeah.
And worked his way up. So before this, he was a talent, right, for WCW. Very good talent.
Mm-hmm. Paulie Dangerously.
And still, people still call him Paulie, right? That's what Stone Cold still calls him.
And he had a very underrated underutilized faction, the Dangerous Alliance in WCW.
Well, did they do the War Games?
I don't remember. Maybe.
Dude,
Well, anyway.
I don't know, because I seen him do War Games, and he, like, it was hilarious. He all pulled out like a football plays, and he's all going over football plays with the guys before they get into the, you know what I'm saying? Like, really, guys, you guys are going to do football plays before you get into the ring?
But, we talk about basically the bottom line is Paul Heyman, just like ECW, influential to this day, obviously still relevant. And Paul Heyman, honestly, geez, you got to go, you don't go pretty far when you start naming
one of the most relevant.
Yeah, influential people in wrestling history, especially when you talk about from the 90s on. I mean, Paul Heyman, top 5 all-time influential people in the wrestling industry. If you go from the 90s on, I mean, it's really hard to leave him off these lists. And
it's hard to even talk about it because he's still at the top.
He still has his hat in the game. And when you look at his age now, I mean, I don't think he's even 60 yet. Still has a lot to give. 57 years old.
So when I watched WrestleMania with my sister and brother-in-law, and they're not big WWE fans, but we watched WrestleMania, my sister said the most entertaining part of it was Paul Heyman.
He was absolutely fantastic in that last match. And his mannerisms, him trying to give a pep talk to Roman Reigns and just saying, "My tribal chief," after he kind of criticized him and told him to, light a fire.
I loved when he did the 1, 2, 3, he fist bumped himself kind of, and then his eyes just looked at the ring and he realized he was wrong. It wasn't a pin. It was just, was great, hilarious. Yeah. But anyway, yes, influential and
just an
been around great for a while
and just a brilliant mind. We'll get into some of the controversy behind him as a person.
Yeah, because was he a brilliant mind when he had his company go out of business and then, couldn't pay guys and...
Yeah, right.
So
there's some questionable character traits.
There's some questionable stuff. In 94, Jim Crockett's non-compete agreement with Ted Turner, who purchased WCW from Crockett, was up, and he decided to start promoting the NWA. Crockett went to Ted Gordon and asked him to hold a tournament for the NWA's World Heavyweight Championship in ECW's home arena. The NWA president alleged that Crockett and Gordon were going to try to monopolize the title and stated that Crockett did not have the NWA board's approval, which resulted in Corluzzo personally overseeing the tournament. So what happened here was they planned to have Shane Douglas. He would face Too Cold Scorpio, and he would throw down the NWA World Heavyweight Championship belt upon winning as an act of defiance, right? So... yeah. It's drama that people don't understand now because there is no NWA, right? Well, there kind of is, but it's not the same. It was just kind of seen as disrespectful to the past, and honestly, the idea of being with the NWA was becoming less and less popular because the WWE was doing their own thing without it, right?
I think at that time, there was a whole... I think the term I was looking for when we talk about society in that time, anti-establishment, right?
Oh yeah,
that's a great one. The theme of the mid to late 90s, anti-establishment. And I guess in the world of pro wrestling, there wasn't anything more establishment than the National Wrestling Alliance, a traditional, governing body of all of pro wrestling, right? I mean, even the Attitude Era Raws in the 97, 98 era, we're using that NWA title and NWA kind of brand with Jim Cornette and Jeff Jarrett and the Rock and Roll Express as a heel faction because they were trying to be traditional, right? An establishment. So the NWA was seen as that kind of establishment, so it just fit in as kind of a natural heel thing, right?
Well, and in the 90s, that establishment had been going on for 30, 40, maybe even longer, but at least 30 years in the memory of wrestling. I mean, the NWA title, and still you've got random ones nowadays. It's like the NWA welterweight title is in Mexico, and Sorry. I also had this really weird thought of like, did the anti-establishment era end after 9/11? But that's a whole different talk that we'll get into another
No, I
time.
mean,
But
yeah, that's a whole other time, because by the time 9/11 happened, ECW was pretty much folded and all that. But another thing to think about too is if I would have told myself or you at that age, hey, listen, that NWA thing that is kind of a joke now, the fucking lead singer of the Smashing Pumpkins is gonna own it in the
Is
year
gonna buy it.
2019.
I'd be like, well, I kind of like the Smashing Pumpkins.
I know,
but
like I like the Smashing Pumpkins. I'm a little more
back
into
then,
punk rock right now, but and hip hop and shit. But Billy Corgan's gonna
I
buy
liked
an NWA. Is Billy?
1979.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
That
Very
was like,
yeah.
it is very strange. I would have been like, okay,
Smashing Pumpkins,
really?
obviously, I think looking back, one of the more underrated bands of that era. Very
And also, this
influential.
10-year-old kid from Chicago is going to compete with AEW in 20 years, and his name's Tony. Never heard of him.
Yeah, well, anyway, yeah, that's one thing. But just to say, hey, the guy from this, I didn't even know he was a wrestling fan until
Me neither.
5 years ago or whatever. But
He must be one of the most hardcore.
But just what a interesting thing to think about is the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins is going to buy the National Arrest.
Well,
I mean, come on, that's crazy.
It's especially confusing combining them from the 90s into nowadays because he's an older guy now. But back then, he was like, a popular
At the top of the
rock
music
artist
industry. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So anyway,
although he was
we've
much
seen
bigger back
yeah,
then. So we have the anti-NWA. So let's go a little more through this. So Todd Gordon and Paul Heyman originally planned the idea of throwing down the NWA World Heavyweight Championship belt. Heyman persuaded Douglas by noting that the negative would only be that NWA traditionalists would see them as traitors. Adding to Douglas's decision was the animosity between Douglas and the NWA president. Douglas was a bad risk, and he had a tendency to no-show events. And it's important to talk about Shane Douglas here also, as Shane Douglas, when I read the book, Mikey Whipwreck was very important, but Shane Douglas was also seen as incredibly important to ECW. I think his gimmick was he was the
this is an interesting thing about Shane Douglas. Shane Douglas was kind of seen as, I don't know if the right term is, a failed WCW talent. He was in the, what was it, with the skateboarding gimmick with Johnny.
Well, he was a teacher, wasn't he?
Yeah, okay, so with WCW, he was in the,
okay,
they called with the skateboarding, the Bodacious Dudes or whatever, I can't,
okay, I'll try to find it.
In a tag team in WCW with
yeah.
John Laurinaitis, where they're basically two skaters or surfers or something like that. And
okay.
the Dynamic Dudes.
The Dynamic Dudes.
He went on to have this run with WWE, WWF at the time, as a know-it-all kind of professor gimmick, and did not work out well. He had, I don't know the details, but there was something where he didn't get along with some of the people there. He was like kind of an Intercontinental champ for a day, or they took it away. I don't remember what happened with the story with that. But the thing about ECW is when it was popular, I remember Shane Douglas just being injured and still being the champ and wearing what looked like a knee brace on his arm. But even though he was the champion, he didn't really seem to be like the most popular or focal point of ECW. So
okay. Well, and this is the difference between me reading it and you actually being there at the time. Because I remember them talking about always wanting him to be kind of the John Cena of ECW, was them wanting to post him in that position. But what you're saying is that he really was never there.
Also, this is me thinking back to me being 16, 17, 15 years old. And
no, but it's good to think those, because that's when you were there.
In 96,
what did you think
97,
when it happened?
98, it was all about guys like Rob Van Dam, Taz, Sabu, the Dudleys. Those were kind of the focal point, especially like, to me, it was like, Rob Van Dam, this is the coolest guy I've ever seen in my life at 19, other than the Rock.
Okay.
Rob Van Dam was one of those big influences on my wrestling fandom.
And even I remember him from as a kid. So Rob Van Dam must have crossed over to like a normal WWE
Right, and he was a guy that
mainstream
we
fan
didn't,
like me.
understand why he wasn't the champ. Like Rob Van Dam is so cool and he was so athletic, and he was one of those guys that really brought that
Yeah.
martial arts style. I mean, honestly, one of the most unique wrestling just styles is Rob Van Dam. I mean, a lot of kicks, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Especially at the time, he had a lot of the Asian martial arts influence that are common for us to see in other promotions now. But at the time, yeah. And then he also had
Honestly,
the high flying,
you know,
too.
him and Sabu, obviously, but Rob Van Dam, I mean, one of the most influential people on the styles we see today.
I can't remember if Sabu or if it was Sabu or Ibushi. Which one of them is a bigger bullshitter that's like, oh, all my botches were planned?
No,
like, I don't remember which one said that.
I don't know.
But...
maybe Ibushi. He's a irreverent.
Maybe
Ibushi
an
says
Ibushi
a lot of
thing,
nonsensical stuff. So
he says a lot of dumb shit like that. Yeah. So, you know, this was Shane Douglas, and they were having a thing. I think this is a
not
great
to say anything
quote,
disparaging about Shane Douglas, because I think he was put in that position. He was more of that traditional wrestler at the time, and that's what made him a heel. He was a guy that didn't leave his feet. He wasn't.
And was he in his 30s at that point? You know, was he at that age of being a heavyweight championship kind of age? That's another question too.
He's 60 now.
60
so
now.
30 years ago.
So
he's 58 years. Okay,
58.
so he was born in 1964. So he was about 34. He was in his early to mid 30s. So, you know, what we have called on the show.
So it kind of had the age
prime
of
his wrestling career, because we talk about that being in the mid 30s. But he was one guy that didn't live
at the
beyond
same time,
ECW. I don't know if he did much after that. Maybe TNA or something. But
no. Yeah. Well, I think this is a great quote from Paul Heyman. From, what is this, an AOL chat?
Sounds about right.
Okay. Some chat. Okay. And he said, the NWA was old school cool when old school wasn't hip anymore. We wanted to set our mark. We wanted to break away from the pack. We wanted to let the world know that we weren't just some independent promotion. And that has a lot to what you say about anti-establishment, right? Where it's pretty much, they said the same thing. Old school wasn't cool anymore. Where nowadays, old school kind of is kind of cool.
Okay, which just think about it this way. Do you see, it kind of plays back to the pop-up we were at. Do you think that anyone in 1998 would want a wrestling shirt from 1975? Do people in the year 2020
and not only that,
want something
but like all
from
the
1992? Hell yes, they do.
Yes, and they will pay $2,500 for that. Yeah, nostalgia is definitely a much huger. It's a huge
nostalgia
factor, actually, nowadays.
Was not a thing back then, unless it was some of the baby boomers that missed.
In wrestling specifically, I mean, look, dude, the idea of they literally trained you to not like nostalgia. Literally, you have Vince or Jim JR saying like, you know, the guy who wears red, white, and blue to tell you to eat your vitamins. No one wants that anymore.
They might want that more now than they did in 1997.
They do. Look at Cody.
Yeah, he is.
That's what Cody is.
It didn't work for It didn't
and we're
work
totally
for,
cool with
no,
that.
that's what I'm saying. They want it now. Wait, okay. So this is what I'm trying to say. In 1997, that shit didn't fly. Now it's kind of starting to fly again.
It didn't fly.
For 50% of the country.
Yeah, and give us. We'll see in 20. We'll have this podcast again in 20 years, and we'll see how things have changed. We might go back to authoritarianism again. But
it's just interesting when you think about it. Well,
everything
I think
old
that
is new
our
again,
generation are a nostalgic bunch, and almost the only generation, the millennials, are more attached to things. But I think that the only thing you had nostalgia in this time in the 90s was maybe some, old hippies that missed Woodstock and stuff,
No, you're right. Back in the day, I remember when they re-released Star Wars, it was a huge deal. And now fucking re-releases, remakes, all that shit is just
Any
a
day,
dime a dozen. So it doesn't mean anything. And even things like this ECW, like we're looking back almost at it in a nostalgic lens. But in 2010, people might not be doing the same thing.
Crazy.
So,
it is
it's
important
crazy
to
how
understand
it
where
works.
society was at the time, and then to
Oh yeah, and it was very different in
Shane
America.
Douglas was kind of more of a traditional wrestler than everyone else in ECW at the time. So there, just to have that, and that's why he was just a perfect fit to be a heel, which is ironic because he was the one.
Does that mean he didn't stand out though?
I mean,
or can you even remember if he stood out to you or not?
I think when I really first started watching ECW, he was injured. And I think he was at the champ, and he had that triple threat faction with him and Taz and Bam Bam Bigelow, and Francine. Yeah.
Who was that again? Francine,
yeah.
And that was his valet.
A term we don't use anymore, but that's what she was back then.
Do we not use it anymore because valet basically means like a hooker?
It's just that it makes a valet something that accompanies. It doesn't. It demeans their role, minimalizes their role.
Minimalizes them.
You know what I mean? So I don't know what we call those now, but
okay. Yeah. So in real quick, we're gonna move on. Just talking about the 2300 arena. This was ECW Arena and their television syndication from 94 to 2001. Oh wow, they've painted it up now, and there's a big ass 2300 on the side of the building, so it looks kind of cool now. It's all black, and it's called the world's most famous bingo hall.
I mean, that's what it was, right? I mean, it was.
I think they still do bingo there.
Probably.
Okay. You got ECW on like Saturdays and then double 22 douche bingo on Sundays.
I mean, it was a big running joke.
And then here's
something to wrestle. Does Bruce still do that podcast?
I haven't listened to it ever since he signed with WWE.
But I mean, he would always, whenever they'd make some kind of reference to ECW, he would yell a random bingo number. That was one of his little running gimmicks.
What an asshole.
Well, we know that he's the king of all bullshitters, but
And then here's a picture of XPW owner Rob Black with wife Lizzie Borden.
That's a whole other thing. Do you know what, dude? We should say that. Did we ever do an XPW episode? Yeah.
No, you've always told me we need to do an episode. And she's a porn star.
She was.
She's a porn star. Okay, we're gonna exit other
ball of wax, and I don't even know if it's with what that whole thing does now. I don't even think it's worth it. It's just not. I don't think people would listen to it.
We will talk about it later. It sounds like one of the best disappointments in
I don't know. It's
pro
just,
wrestling.
Anyway, we'll get to that while we're moving on this timeline. I think I'll go a little deeper.
So I want to say, like, you go back to 97 and you look at Barely Legal, which I've seen a bunch of, and there was some real good shit there, man. I mean, when we're talking about pure wrestling quality in 97, and we haven't even gotten into their, they were working with WWE at that point.
Yeah, which kind of going back now is, over the last 5-6 years has kind of been brought to the forefront. But when you were watching ECW in 1997, 1998, 1996, you were thinking you were watching this whole quote-unquote anti-establishment. There's that word again. There's that term again. Something that was...
That they were working with the establishment for much of 96 and 97.
And a lot of people, you'll talk about in a second when the ECW was kind of on Raw in 97, but people were catching on with wrestling in that mid-97, early 97, and might have missed that and thought ECW was this totally renegade operation that was this forbidden fruit that we would catch at 1 a.m. on a UHF channel that,
And we didn't even get it here, by the way. So here's the thing is, and I'm sending you just an awesome picture of the first DVD or tape or whatever. Can you go into your chat
Yeah.
and look at that? Did that send?
John N's been here. Hold on. I see.
I just
Barely
love
Legal
that.
97. Yeah.
Isn't
Yeah.
that great? No minors, no exceptions.
And
So,
barely, just to kind of give context to the term barely legal.
No, that's
It's
a porn thing, bro.
It's referencing probably someone that's just turned 18 or whatever.
I used to have a DVD called Barely Legal
I'm sure you
3
did.
or whatever, and it was not
Yeah, right.
wrestling.
Well, not the wrestling that we watch on TV, but
No, it was very
So-
different.
yes, this was a thing that you would not see. There's gonna be no WWE's next pay-per-view in Puerto Rico is not called Barely Legal. We'll just put it that way. That's not something we're gonna see again. Yeah.
No, they're not bringing that one back.
So this was a different time, kids.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It was named after porn. It says no minors, no exceptions. So obviously aiming for the 18 and plus demographic, 18 to 30
Yes.
maybe. Yeah, so that's just a great DVD cover with the horrible Photoshop.
I mean, honestly,
yeah,
it's about
wonderful.
the porn videos of the time look just same thing.
it did actually
Probably
look
done
the
on
same.
Quark
Very
Express
similar.
or something like that. Quark
On what?
Express. It's one of those old layout things.
What is Quark?
You know, it's like a Photoshop or a InDesign of the 90s.
You
Of
would
course
remember.
I'm an old
I
piece
don't
of shit.
think I was using Photoshop in like
Well, there you
2002. So by 97. So this is something that Justin brought up to me before the show. Is that, by the way, I'm just gonna explain it to them. I sent Justin a Barely Legal DVD box, and you have Sandman holding up a kendo stick, and you've got
Rob Van Dam.
Rob Van Dam walking to the ring with his, both of these pictures are from in the matches, and they just photoshopped him into this very late 90s porn / wrestling cover that you'll have to see. So before we did this, Josh brought up the fact that they were on WWF.
Josh?
ECW was
You
on
call me
WWF.
Josh? What are you, one of my grandma's friends?
Or
Okay.
Justin. No,
It's all
sorry,
good.
my coworker
No worries,
is Josh.
no worries. Okay.
Justin. Happens all the time. Justin brought up that, and my brother's name is.
Well,
anyway.
I'll just put it this way.
You brought up
if
that,
you talk to anyone named Justin, they'll tell you how many times they get called Jason. So there you go.
My brother's name is
Okay.
Justin. It gets confusing and deep, yeah. So as Justin had mentioned to me before the show, they were working with WWEF for a little while. And tell me what you remember about that, Justin, because I don't think I was watching at that point. I must have been, but I don't remember these guys.
Wasn't fully back in. I was watching more casually at that time, but you had Sabu and Rob Van Dam kind of appearing semi-regularly on Raw with kind of a ECW invasion angle. You had Jerry Lawler working with them. But that kind of...
So I want to say that in the 1995 King of the Ring match between Mabel and Savio Vega, the crowd chanted ECW, ECW. This was in Philadelphia. So this would have been the first time storyline-wise that Vince became aware of ECW, right?
Yes. And I think at that time they were probably starting to promote their first pay-per-view. And which was it Barely Legal? Was that their first pay-per-view?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So
yep.
I think, I don't know exactly why Vince said, let's help these guys out, but I think at some point, Vince might have been a place where they could see them as almost like a developmental or like a minor league, or they can, there was some type of value he saw in them at that point. Or, you know what?
So
Paul Heyman was probably just a really good talker. And somehow, he obviously knew people that were in WWF and kind of was able to get himself in at that point too.
Well, Vince is going to respect a lot of those old guard from WCW. And I'll say this, Vince seems to generally respect other wrestlers from other places if they work for him.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, that's a very broad saying, but this was in the 90s, and you know, how many people did he pull from WCW and made them into stars? So, I mean, it's just like, just because they were from another company, it didn't mean he respected them, knew about them, and I'm sure Paul Heyman had quite a bit of pull, because he is just as charismatic as Vince McMahon,
Yeah,
you know?
I think the to really sum it up in the bottom line is simply put it, Paul Heyman must have established some type of value to offer Vince at the time.
I could see that. Do you remember In Your House 10 Mind Games?
Was that the main event? Was Shawn Michaels and Mankind? Great match, by the way. Definitely watch that again. But yeah, tell me what else happened on that.
Okay. Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Paul Heyman, and Taz were in the front row seats.
Okay.
Sandman interfered in the match. He threw beer on Savio Vega during his strap match with Bradshaw. McMahon acknowledged ECW status as a local up-and-coming promotion on the air. The following night on Monday Night Raw, when the Body Donnas versus the British Bulldogs and Owen Hart, Bill Alfonso, and Taz could be seen invading the program. Both Taz and Alfonso were able to jump the security rails, and Taz was able to prominently display a bright orange sign with the black letter that read, "Sabu fears Taz ECW."
Crazy to think how less than a year later, people that were catching on with ECW and maybe WWE starting to catch on with a bigger crowd completely didn't even know that happened or forgot about it.
Yeah. It kind of shows like how your memory works. Like, you remember kind of the important things, but if they're not that, like, if you were a huge Taz fan, you would have remembered it. But if you never heard of Taz, and a lot of those guys, like I didn't, my memory never saved onto those things.
Right. It's crazy.
So they did do ECW invaded Raw on the Manhattan Center. They advanced the storyline, plugged their first ever pay-per-view, and worked 3 matches in front of a WWF audience, while McMahon called the action with Jerry Lawler and Paul Heyman. So they had Paul Heyman on commentary at that point.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so we look at the John Cena versus Edge match, or no, John Cena versus Rob Van Dam match from years later. And you can see some of these things starting back then. I mean, the ECW fans chanted boring at the WWF wrestlers. And when ECW performers arrived, they popped and introduced the Monday night audience to some trademark ECW chants. So, yeah.
And it's funny how
little bit of
ECW, after they were bought out by WWE, it still had that anti-establishment nostalgia to it, or I don't know if that was the right word yet, but yeah, we weren't really, like, didn't really become common knowledge about it being bankrolled. Even with that 97 thing, pretty easy to find that they were invading the show, quote unquote. It really didn't come out till recent years that they were, you know, at times being either bankrolled or heavily promoted from WWF.
True. Yeah, that's really true. A lot of that stuff. I mean, but we weren't reading the Observer back then either, right?
No, but I don't even know if, well, definitely the dirt sheet culture wasn't prominent through the wrestling community like it is, but also I was 14, 15, 16, 17.
I think,
so.
No, that's what I was going to say. I think it was more prominent if you were a hardcore fan in your 20s, but it wasn't on the internet like it is now as much. So, but, you know, Meltzer has said, they're like, when do you have the most subscribers? He's like, I don't know. Every year I get more subscribers.
Right.
So back then, yeah, you're right. It was a little more secretive, but I don't know, man. If you go back and read the Montreal Screwjob coverage in the Observer, I'm pretty sure he knew everything that was going on at the time, because he has like minute by minute coverage of the Montreal Screwjob and all that shit. I'm going to use the bathroom real quick. I'll be right back, and we're going to get into Mike Awesome and ECW Collapse and some of later ECW. I'll be right back, okay? What's Kohaka doing?
Brushing his teeth.
It's about that time. All right, let's get right back into it. Okay, so another issue was this Mike Awesome controversy, and what happened was he was the ECW World Heavyweight Champion, and he ended up going onto Nitro in 2000 while Nitro was terrible. So
We're skipping some years with that reference, though, right?
that is going on to 2000. That happened. The WWF and ECW cross promotion was in 96 and 97.
Uh-huh.
And the ECW on TNN collapse was from 99 to 2001. So there was a quick little thing in 2000 where, Mike Awesome showed up on Nitro. Well, and honestly, I don't think any of this is a huge deal because both companies were kind of failing at that time.
Yeah, and I think when, if I remember correctly, it felt like when ECW was getting onto TNN that like it was going to start to get big because it got on this like prominent channel, right?
Uh-huh.
And wow, that's crazy to think about now that I think about it. But I think it started to lose a lot of its street cred because ECW is one of those things where, it's getting mainstream now and people started to drop off.
Yeah, I could see that, especially with the way that it was portrayed over the years, as we have said, as anti-establishment. There is one thing I want to ask you about because we brought it up before the show, and this was in July 2000, and ECW made its West Coast debut, and they did go to Los Angeles. And what happened is when they were in LA, we've talked about it a little bit. This XPW owner, Rod Black, purchased 6 front row seats, and the tickets were given to the XPW talent, and their mission was to make it clear that ECW was on enemy turf. And it was not part of the storylines or anything like that. XPW donned shirts emblazoned with the XPW logo, gaining attention of ECW wrestler Tommy Dreamer. Security ejected the XPW from the building, and a brawl broke out in the parking lot between members. Do you know anything about any of this?
Well, I was there.
You were where? You were where?
I was at ECW Heatwave 2000.
Are you sure that's the one I'm talking about? Hang on.
Yes.
Okay, it is.
ECW Heatwave 2000.
Okay,
right?
where was it? Where was it if you were there?
It was at the Grand Olympic Auditorium.
Yep, that's right. Okay.
And I was there. I was not aware of XPW at the time. We can do a whole other episode on this because I ended up in the 01, 02 going to a lot of XPW shows. Did not age well, I'll just put it that way, but they were a lot of fun at the time. But they were seen basically as almost like a West Coast ECW as they kind of went on. Had a huge...
And did you guys want it to be a West Coast ECW?
Yes. I mean, that's what it was seen as. It had the same vibe where it was on... The television was on a, local UHF channel late at night. And it had that grimy quality that ECW had. It was a very, very similar vibe. But injected with more of that kind of,
porn stars. There was a lot more porn stars in XPW.
Rob Black made his money in porn, in very obscene genre.
And who is Homeless Jimmy?
Homeless Jimmy was a wrestler. That his gimmick was he was a homeless guy.
It's not a bad one.
He was a babyface. There was guys like White Trash Johnny Webb.
So don't go too far because we are going to do an episode on XPW. But you don't remember XPW being there, or you weren't in the parking lot when they got in a fight.
We just kind of who are those guys in the front row? Because we were kind of on the upper level across from them, so we saw them kind of cause the thing, and then just we didn't know that it carried out into the hallways in the parking lot. We didn't know that at the time. And I don't remember exactly when we found out, but that's, I think, a little bit after that. I don't remember this whole thing. It's a long time ago. But when there was a point, you know, I don't know if it was a few months later, a few days later, where we're like, oh shit, that was XPW.
Well, let me tell you this. At the November to Remember pay-per-view a few months later, color commentator Don Callis made a reference to the incident, describing a wild brawl as looking like an LA parking lot. As in there was a brawl in the wrestling he was commentating on, and he said the brawl looks like an LA parking lot. So,
right,
yeah, cute little thing from Cyrus the Virus there. In '99, as you brought up, ECW did TNN, a 3-year contract, and limited advertising, low budget, and the broadcaster, it became very high rated actually, and the network's Friday night slot, both in ratings and lineup, but financial problems began rocking the company. So it was canceled in favor of Raw is War moving to the network. And
and I bet you to this day there's prominent wrestlers who still are owed money by Paul Heyman.
Well, after they were canceled, ECW struggled. They tried to get a new TV deal. You know, times were changing, bro. You couldn't just do the live events. Like, even in Japan, New Japan had their TV show, right? All Japan had their TV show back in the 90s. It wasn't just about getting people in the seats. And we know nowadays that the whole wrestling business is all about TV rights fees, right? So,
right.
Different time. ECW Hardcore TV aired for the last time in January 7th, 2001. And it was Guilty as Charged, the company's last pay-per-view. And then they did a show in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. That would be its final event of any kind. Living Dangerously was scheduled for March 11th, but because of financial trouble, it was canceled. Heyman could not get out of financial trouble. ECW closed on April 14th, 2001. Moment of silence. Heyman, who became color commentator for Raw that February. So it's like, dude, Heyman he was on his way out the fucking door, right?
I mean, yeah, he pretty much, his parachute for himself was to be right away. He was probably
back to the big company.
Yeah, exactly.
He replaced Jerry Lawler, who had quit. You know, you've heard this story. He quit WWF in protest after Stacey Carter had been fired. We've all heard that story. Yeah. Okay. Heyman never told his wrestlers the company was on its last legs. He also noted in later years that he had made an effort to put ECW on the USA Network. So that looks like there's a lot of drama there that you and I have no way to comment on.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Heyman as a guy that in his mind, he just never gave up on the possibility.
I've had bosses like that they're always positive, even if they know it's not. Oh, like, just give me a few more weeks, man. We're going to get this.
Yeah, and I feel like he wasn't necessarily trying to not pay his talent or get away with not paying him. He just honestly thought he was going to eventually do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but at the same time, you look at someone like SBF, right? You know, SBF and crypto, all that stuff. Do you know the health story? And what was his company called?
I don't know, but he was
FTX,
just a guy.
FTX.
He just got in way over his head. Yeah.
Well, no, the thing is, like, yeah, I took tons of money from the company, and, you know, I just didn't know what I was doing. So, you know,
in over his head. That's the perfect term right there.
I think Paul Heyman's a little smarter than to be in over his head, but that was a long time ago. So we talked about this. At the end, the company had $1,385,500 in the bank account. And not even in the bank account. We're talking like liquid funds and stuff. So they had a library of videotapes for $500,000, a '98 Ford truck for $19,000, and the remaining inventory of their merchandise was worth $4.
Was a sub
Wow.
keychain or something.
The highest amounts owed to talent were they owed $150,000 to Rob Van Dam. They owed $145,000 to Shane Douglas. They owed $47,000 to Francine Fournier. And in 2003, WWE bought their assets. So
Oh, 2003.
that's actually a big deal, right?
Well, it seemed like they would have bought that earlier, but yeah.
No, they did WCW first, man, right?
Well, that's true. That's true.
And then I think at that time I remember thinking like, oh wow, WWE they're buying everybody.
They
From
bought
kinda
everyone.
hearing about it.
Yeah.
They bought everyone except, Ring of Honor. But
But did they exist in 2002 yet?
Ring of Honor?
Yeah,
Didn't we do a wrestling in ROH? You should know that.
we did. Yeah, I don't remember the year.
I don't remember either.
In my head, I'm
not
like 2005 or something.
Yeah, something like that. So but ECW does not die there, as it lives on in each and every one of our hearts every
Yeah.
year. But they
And-
also did a thing, right?
Yeah.
Did you pass out, brother?
No, I'm good. I'm just leaning back. I got my...
I know you look
Mic's on
comfy.
here?
I'm just
Yeah.
making sure you're not falling asleep. We only
No,
got a
no,
little
no,
bit
I'm
left.
good. I'm good.
I should pull something like that too. You look comfy.
There
But
you go.
I
Just
got-
need some...
No, I can't because I got to look up all this stuff. You just get to talk. I have to look up stuff.
Okay.
The Alliance. So, have you gone back and looked at the invasion and seen the disaster that it's like the best idea ever that turned out to be a disaster?
Are you talking about the WCW
Yeah.
invasion?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, we all know the reason why that didn't work. It's very, very simple. The
Because a lot of the stars didn't.
Yes, the WCW did not have the proper talent. Had some good talent that kind of came in, but they just didn't have the talent that they needed to pull something off like that.
I thought it was that WWE didn't use the correct talent. Like,
that. Well,
instead
no.
of-
Well, when WCW was bought out, you had guys like Kevin Nash, Goldberg, Scott Hall, that were basically being paid to be at home for 2 or 3 extra years.
oh, okay.
And from a business standpoint, do I go work for WWF 300 days a year, or do I just
get
ride out
paid?
my contract? Or both? Well, do I do nothing or get paid for 2 years,
do
or do I
something
go
and
on
get
the road? And
I'd be like,
the
I'm gonna
same
do
money.
nothing, dog. I'm
So
fucking 30 years
it-
old.
it didn't make sense for them to go out and perform when they, you know what I mean? So they were stuck with, they had Booker T, and maybe like Jeff Jarrett, who got fired right away, if I remember correctly. But then you were stuck with
Chris
guys like,
Benoit.
they came over before the WCW purchase, don't forget.
Oh, okay.
Eddie Guerrero
Yeah.
and Chris Benoit and Saturn
And-
were already over.
Okay.
So you were stuck with guys like, and to an extent, these guys ended up being kind of productive. Some of them, you had guys like
Huge
Chuck
erection.
Palumbo and Hugh Morris, I guess maybe. Sean
Yeah.
Stasiak.
Wow.
Yeah, right. See, you didn't really have the type of firepower you need to really pull that off. You'd want the NWO. You'd want
You want
like
Sting,
Goldberg, Sting, yeah,
NWO. Yeah.
and
Okay.
so they just didn't
okay.
really have the ammo to make that work, I guess is the right word.
Yeah. So a few months after WWE had bought them and there was the demise, ECW resurfaced as a stable in part of WWF Invasion storyline. And on July 9th, 2001, Heyman, who had been hired by the WWF as a commentator, as we talked about, joined several former ECW alumni on the roster, Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer, and claimed that he was bringing ECW back to participate in the invasion by themselves. However, the ownership of ECW, including the use of its name on air, was disputed, despite Heyman still technically owning the company when he jumped ship to the WWF. What a confusing situation. Jesus, dude. So
Yeah.
they tried to do all sorts of stuff. See, the defection of WWF superstars to the Alliance continued the shift as less focus was placed on WCW and ECW performers. In fact, with rare exceptions such as Van Dam, the ECW alumni in the Alliance were given even less focus than WCW's performers, with WCW's logo even representing the entire stable. The feud lasted 6 months and concluded with WWF defeating the Alliance at Survivor Series when Kurt Angle attacked Steve Austin and The Rock, or allowing The Rock. It's a lot of nonsense here. Allowing The Rock, who had gotten self attacked by Chris Jericho. So there's all this storyline. So it just didn't work out that well. In 2003, they did do a rise and fall of ECW. Okay.
Yeah.
Seems a little early, right?
Yeah, I guess, but I mean, there was enough. It was pretty close to tell about it, I guess. I mean, it was already fallen by that time, and I think this is when WWE was starting to kind of expand their universe and acknowledge all the things they've bought as part of kind of their lineage, I guess.
Yeah. They're saying the really good one was a DVD called Forever Hardcore by Jeremy Borash. And that was really good. Interviews with Shane Douglas, Sandman, and Raven, the wrestlers who were integral to the history of ECW. And they were not featured on the rise and fall of ECW because they weren't under WWE contract. So if you look at this Forever Hardcore, it talks about Sabu, New Jack, and
New Jack's another guy we didn't mention. Yeah.
And New Jack admits to attempting to kill Vic Grimes. In the rematch to their notorious scaffold match.
That would be for the XPW episode.
Okay, so there was a New Jack ECW wrestler, dangerous bumps, stiff hardcore wrestling, shooting on opponents, mass transit incident.
There you go.
17-year-old Eric Koulis, an aspiring wrestler who used the ring name Mass Transit, was seriously injured tag team match against the Gangstas. And the most severe injury occurred when Koulis was bladed too deeply by New Jack. So he cut into his head and he cut him real deep, probably caused him to lose a ton of blood, right?
Yes. I mean, this was one of the most infamous
wrestling incidences.
Yeah. New Jack was a unique. We could do a whole episode on New Jack. What a just polarizing figure in the history of pro wrestling. Passed away recently.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's not go too deep there because, like you said, that's a whole New Jack. I mean, that's a whole thing in itself.
But a very big part of ECW had the epic entrance where he would come out to Natural Born Killers by Dr. Dre.
And it would just play.
It would just play through. He would come, in a way like Homeless Jimmy, he'd come with a shopping cart full of weapons, and he would just start tossing them into rings. He would just start tossing them into the ring while the Dr. Dre song was still playing the whole time, like you said. And definitely, he, his influence is still seen today in different and maybe not as much now, but definitely one of the iconic ECW performers.
Okay. I want to state that later on things did kind of change. In 2005, they started talking about ECW more, and they were, there was kind of that nostalgia factor we talk about. And they did ECW One Night Stand on June 12th, a reunion that featured ECW alumni. And after the financial crisis, 2006, 2007, they did ECW One Night Stand 2006. This was the one that features the Rob Van Dam versus John Cena match that everyone has to go watch if you haven't seen it. It's fucking wild.
It was absolutely insane. I mean,
I don't want you to say too much about it, bro, because if people listening have never seen it, it's really something you need to just go watch, because it doesn't matter what area you're from. It's incredible.
Just the scene of it, like it. You don't usually get this sense from a WWE show where basically the crowd is on top of the wrestlers.
Yeah, also, you're not often worried about the babyface getting beat up after he leaves the fucking arena.
Right. And, John Cena getting his shirt thrown back to him about 10 times. Yeah. And if you want
to watch... Edge.
I won't even, it's funny that I'm going to say this, but if you want to see what an ECW crowd was all about, if you want to see what the whole vibe was of what ECW
and the
was to offer,
the rejection of the mainstream
establishment,
yeah.
Right? I won't even say, oh, watch Barely Legal 97, their first pay-per-view. That'll give you a whole lot. No, I say you watch this match from 2006 when the company was folded for 5 years. And that gave you a better understanding of the vibe and the ambiance of what ECW was you had the biggest star in WWE at the time. He was a babyface, if I remember correctly, right?
Oh, yeah.
And you had Rod Van Dam, who was everyone's favorite wrestler in 1998 that was watching ECW. And, up until that point, they thought was kind of underutilized and underappreciated in WWE, right? Yeah. And just watch that match. I mean, obviously...
Just watch the match. There's so much we could say about it, but you'll see some crazy shit. And even the angles afterwards are real different than you're going to see on a modern... the angles with JBL and Kurt Angle and the SmackDown versus... Very, 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 very different than anything you see nowadays. So...
Absolutely.
Yeah. They definitely came back with it in 2005. Like we said, they did the ECW One Night Stand. They had a few of those. But after that, it was kind of seen as kind of not a great thing. I mean, they tried to do ECW again. You have people like CM Punk that kind of came through the rebranded ECW.
Bobby Lashley, Vince McMahon was an ECW champ, I think.
Jesus.
With the do-rag.
Under the WW... Okay. So at ECW One Night Stand 2006, the brand would continue to operate until February 16th, where it became defunct and was replaced with NXT.
Wow.
And then, now sometimes you have some ECW influences. Matches featuring a rule set of the ECW promotion were classified as being under Extreme Rules, right?
Right.
But now that's kind of... Extreme Rules is like a whole pay-per-view.
Right.
So, following, this is some later stuff. Tommy Dreamer's debut in TNA, a new stable was called EV 2.0, started, and it was, let's see, who was in that? Hardcore Justice? Okay, he didn't tell me he was in that. Who's in that? So, EV...
I don't know, man. You're talking about
me and TNA.
In my lapsed time.
There you go. Al Snow, Bill Alfonso, Brian Kendrick, Johnny Swinger, Mick Foley, Raven, Taz. So they did a little thing in TNA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, it worked
and
for
then
a minute.
After that, Dreamer founded House of Hardcore, a promotion named after ECW Wrestling School and inspired by the hardcore style of wrestling. Since then, House of Hardcore has held numerous wrestling events in areas where ECW was held. So,
is that still a thing, House of Hardcore?
I don't know if they're still going on, but I heard of it a few years ago.
I think
is it still going on?
I don't know if it
might have been a death of COVID.
Yeah, I mean it was big until COVID. I wouldn't say. Yeah,
no,
it was.
You're right. No, it is a 58 event. The April 11th 58 event at 2300 in Pennsylvania was postponed due to Corona.
And that was
like
it,
many sporting events, the next House of Hardcore event is depending upon the coronavirus. And then we never heard from him again. That's rough.
Yeah, I think, but since then, Tommy Dreamer kind of works for Impact now, so.
Okay. He's had a good relationship with TNA / Impact. Following the closure of ECW, a handful of new professional wrestling promotions would launch or expand to fill in the void that features former talent. Ring of Honor would launch in 2002, after RF Video's owner Rob Feinstein convinced to fill the ECW void by starting his own wrestling promotion and distributing its made-for-DVD production through RF Video. After several ownership changes, ROH is currently owned by Tony Khan, the owner of All Elite Wrestling. Other hardcore promotions such as CZW and XPW would try to follow suit in years ahead. So, but none of them quite would get to that level.
No, there's been some viable, companies that have survived. But I'm not survived necessarily, but have,
I would argue that AEW, while not quite ECW level, does do a good job of representing some of the more hardcore matches.
Oh, for sure. I mean, guys like Jon Moxley and would have been absolutely huge in 1998 ECW.
Absolutely, dude. And guys like Takeshita too.
Takeshita would have been great. Hangman Page.
Even Takeshita, Jon Moxley.
But even, I know we're kind of the Mike Awesome thing. One thing I wanted to say was a huge thing. You look at my two latest try-ins, Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka.
And wait a sec. Did you draw those because you knew we were going to talk about ECW?
They might have had a little bit of an influence in that,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just wondering if that was random.
No, I think I was like, he's going to do ECW, so it might have made my choice easier that night.
I love the Tanaka, by the way, with his blading scars on his head.
Yes. Well, what's funny is he liked it, and then I don't know if he shared it, but
oh, nice.
In the description, I wrote, since I drew Mike Awesome yesterday, it was time for Masato Tanaka, one of the best rivalries in the 1990s pro wrestling. And what I liked about him liking it, he went back and also liked the Mike Awesome drawing. So I feel like he read it, and it's kind of cool.
Tanaka's the man, and he's wrestling in Noah right now. He's awesome,
right? And
still going.
So if you want to watch some of those matches, Mike Awesome, one of the most rated and just athletic big man you'll ever see.
I don't even know about saying big man, like just wrestler in general, because I didn't know about him until last year, and when I did watch him, I was just like, dude, this guy's fucking crazy, bro. And he really was too. He did some wild shit that you will see on like AEW nowadays, like once every couple weeks.
And him and Tanaka. I mean, if you want to see just kind of I know there's the Bret Hart, Stone Cold stuff, the McMahon, Stone Cold, those rivalries, but that Tanaka and Mike Awesome, I don't know if they had 2-3 matches, whatever it was, in that circa 98, 99. I mean,
rivalry.
Yeah, I mean, I know ECW had a lot of rivalries and stuff, but just go out of your way to check out Tanaka and
Awesome. Go out of your way, guys. There's a lot of other good stuff, Justin. Specifically, when we do talk about these Japanese wrestlers, you'll see a lot of great stuff from Dick Togo, and they're like 6-man Japanese matches. Gran Hamada, stuff like that. There's some real great stuff there, guys. You go watch Taz versus Bam Bam Bigelow.
Yep.
You know the match I'm talking about?
Yes. When he threw him through the entrance.
When he
T-boned him.
He threw him off the entrance into chairs, which was wild. Yeah. And then he backpacked Taz through the ring and broke the hole in the ring.
And of course, if you've ever watched ECW television back then, you remember the night Kumano Wanalea danced upon the ECW arena on top.
These
arena.
Were iconic moments, guys. Back when our cable box had like a digital red number on the front, and you had like 50 channels.
Right. Yes.
So, and then you always had the friend. Did you always have the friend that had the black box?
Absolutely. That's how I used to get a lot of my WWF pay-per-views. I hope
from
the statute
Colorado,
limitation is up.
We didn't have that in Colorado, but I imagine in LA the black box was very popular.
Yeah, it was easier to stay not spoiled too. So I would get that. Monday Night Raw, we didn't have the time zone unless you had a friend that had DirecTV. So a lot of times we would get the VHS from a friend of the day of the pay-per-view on Monday morning, and then as soon as we got home from school on Monday, we would watch the pay-per-view, and then
when it was
watch
done,
Raw
started.
Yeah, so that's how. Pretty cool,
wow. Right? It was cool back in the day, although I'm so happy we don't have to do shit like that nowadays.
Right, but at least it was easy. I can't open my phone and see, oh shit, Sonata won. You know?
That's true. But no, I appreciate that, guys. Look, there's a lot more we could talk about ECW. Neither Justin and I are experts on ECW, but it's something we find interesting and we think is interesting to the history of wrestling in general. And we respect almost all the competitors and athletes that went through it, including those competitors or even managers that still go to nowadays, like a little Paulie Dangerously. But there's so much history there. You have Benoit, you have Nancy Benoit, you have like the New Jack, and there's just a lot of history, whether good or bad. You have Mikey Whipwreck, the Dudleys, the idea of mainstreaming hardcore wrestling, which we see on Wednesdays every week now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely something that took it onto the Western. I mean, they didn't have explosives matches. They didn't necessarily have, barbed wire death matches, but, just the chair shots and the blood.
Oh, God. Chair shots I never want to see again, to be honest. The blood. And honestly, Justin, at my age, it actually scared me as a kid. You were 4 or 5 years above me. At my age, I actually remember seeing ECW and thinking, I am too young to watch this.
And
so I did the right thing.
Bouncy house style rings.
And the crowd just freaking out and screaming, which is like, unless you were watching a lot of Japanese wrestling, like a lot of crowds weren't that crazy.
No, so it was definitely like, it was Philadelphia. Hey, the Rock is...
It is Philadelphia, and we will see what... WWE's going back to Philadelphia this year. They're going to play that nostalgia card. So we'll see what that means.
I'm wondering what kind of ECW... I would love to say WrestleMania goes extreme, but I don't think we'll see that. But...
Well, we'll definitely... they're definitely going to do something because it's WWE. They know that nostalgia is like a lot of their money.
The NXT show will be called Barely Legal.
I don't think Barely Legal will ever be a wrestling show again.
Yeah,
I even think porn is even going away from that now. So, as a porn aficionado...
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, they're even getting away from that. Now it's called like, it's more of something like almost...
Extremely legal?
Extremely legal,
Nothing to see here.
Which is like the best of both worlds. Like, no, they're all 40. They've been legal for 20 years. So anyways, guys, thank you so much for listening to us. Justin, it was great having an ECW conversation with you and a little bit about LA. You're awesome, brother. And next week, or in a couple weeks, or next week, but probably in a couple weeks, we'll be back into the normal gist of things. Yes. I think we might be talking about Puerto Rico by then. But we'll also be talking a little bit about AEW selling out, or trying to sell out Wembley, which I think we all hope they do. So we'll have a lot more news coming up in the next 2 weeks. Thank you guys for everything. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And I will talk to you guys later.